Hey, yo, everybody, what's going on? Welcome into another episode of Catching Feelings, not only on my Facebook, but on the Facebook and Twitter channels for the Queens Baseball Convention, the one and only QBC. I'm your host, John Sapanaro, and look, it has been a great week for the Mets by and large. They've won 5 in a row. They're back in first place. We are going to get into all of that, but it's Catching Feelings, so you know the rant at the beginning is going to be filled with some kind of venom and some kind of negativity. And despite the Mets having a great week, that's exactly where we're going to start. Because if you listen to sports media in New York cover this team, you would think that the Mets had a terrible week. That's what you would think. You would think the Mets are on a losing streak. You would think the Mets can't get out of their own way. You would think the Mets are the worst baseball team in the history of baseball. And I understand that the Mets in their history have not built up a lot of equity to deserve being covered in a positive light. But look, when a team changes ownership as a fan, that is the thing that you wish and you hope and you wait for that never, ever, ever happens. And it finally did. And if you watch the show every week, you know we've talked about this before. The Steve Cohen-led Mets are not the Wilpon-run Mets. Okay, and the team and the media rather has to stop covering the team as if that's the case, as if nothing has changed, because it is so unbelievably frustrating. We talked a lot last week about the Chili Davis firing. They made it seem like the Mets did some awful thing by firing this guy, and I've said it here. I've said it on my podcast. I think Chili Davis is a good guy, but this is a results business, and he was not getting the results. He's also had a history of being let go by teams that then go on offensive explosions, like Boston and Chicago, both teams who got better after Chili Davis left. Okay, but that's another issue. Then we have the Lindor, McNeil fight, not fight, raccoon, rat, possum, whatever it was, right? We have that situation. The Mets players try to do a team-friendly, team-building behind the scenes, kind of brush it aside, kind of not make a big deal, keep it in the clubhouse, keep it in the locker room, and the media makes it seem as though, oh my God, how could the Mets possibly do this? How could the Mets not give us the information? How could they not answer the questions? Some things just have to stay in the locker room. That's true of all sports forever. You don't get unlimited, unfettered access to every little bit of what goes on behind the scenes. And the media's butthurt now because the leaks aren't the same. The media's upset because they can't run to Jeff Wilpon for a nonsense story. And that's what brings me to the deGrom injury, which we'll get into from an injury perspective in a little bit, okay? But deGrom, the best player in the planet, the best pitcher in the world, right, in the universe, the most valuable player on the Mets team, he misses a start last week. Everybody says he knows his own body. He obviously does, okay? The guy takes an extra day, and then he's Superman in the next start. So we have no problem with deGrom doing things his way. They skip him. He winds up being hurt. They skip him again. He gets an MRI, no big deal. He goes out, he pitches 5 innings. He's not quite right. He winds up on the IL. No structural damage, so it seems like everything is fine. And the media now taking the Mets to task once again over the handling of this injury. Meanwhile, under the Wilpons, the Mets were notorious for not putting guys on the IL, playing shorthanded, screwing over Jed Lowry, Carlos Beltran, Zach Wheeler, you name it. Screwing these guys over on injuries, not letting them go get surgery, not letting them talk to their own doctors. That was always the problem with the Mets. Now, all of a sudden, the Mets are trying to do something and exercise an abundance of caution for the most valuable player on their team, who, oh, by the way, happens to be the best player in the universe. And somehow the Mets are wrong for doing that too. And it's because sports media, especially in New York, is so lazy. These beat reporters have rested on their laurels for 25, 30 years that the Mets are the Mets and they're the little brothers and they're embarrassing and they're all this and they're all that. And they just want to beat that drum over and over and over again. And I'm just tired of it because the Mets are trying to change the rhetoric. And to their credit, they're doing an okay job, but it's not going to happen overnight. Not everything, though, means that they're the same old Mets. It doesn't mean that the Mets are bad. It doesn't mean that the Mets are inept. They're trying to change that. They're doing a damn good job along the way, and you got to give them a little bit of credit where credit is due. That said, I'm going to bring in my guest this week. He is a huge Mets fan. He's a hilarious comedian. You got to check him out. Jacob Sirof. I'm going to bring him in right now. Jacob.
I wasn't picking my nose. It was just right. I was resting. I was waiting for you. Just so typical. What's up, man?
Hey, listen, man. Look, I know you heard the rant up top, so that's where we're going to start. You've been a Met fan a little longer than I have, right? But the notion has always been the same.
A little longer, but probably less a smaller proportion of my life, because I didn't become a Mets fan until I was about 10 years old, and you were probably born into it, because I'm not a New Yorker. I don't know, but we don't have to get into my whole background. But I've been a Mets fan since 1985 was my first year as a Mets fan. Did I lose you? I lost your camera.
No, you're good. You're good. Okay. I just pulled you up full screen.
Oh, word. So the rant. It's interesting. You're fired up, man. It's funny. Maybe I'm a victim of the mainstream media, because I tend to have the take that you're, railing against there. That the Mets are kind of a shit show. Oh, pardon me. They are kind of a mess, and have been, and will continue to be. But I do think they're doing better. You're right, and I do think they're trying to do better. But I think they do, like, okay. It's like when Biden stepped in to handle the pandemic, he inherited a system that was out of whack and, non-functional. And I feel like, maybe Cohen came in and kind of inherited the will. It's not going to just change overnight. And of course, the New York media, that's like you said, they've painted themselves into this narrative, and painted the Mets and themselves into this narrative where they're, they're the hard luck little brother team that can't get anything right. But at the same time, having been a Mets fan for so long, there's just this type of thing. It's like we're a little bit of a boy who cried wolf franchise, because we've had we're always in the news for the wrong reasons, is what I think. I have a twin brother who, for strange reasons, is a diehard San Diego Padre fan, and we would always have these stupid debates over the years about which team had it worse. We're both hard luck teams, and he would say, we'd never won a title, but I'm thinking, yeah, they're a bad team. We could both be, but the Mets. It's not that we're bad. It's that there's a certain type of drama that follows us around, like Mr. Met flipping off a fan, or Bobby Valentine in disguise in the dugout, or just, there's just a certain, or Bobby Valentine saying that the players resented his relationship with Piazza because they're Italian, or, it's always something beyond the pale with the Mets. So I guess maybe I'm still trained. I like your optimism your optimism / rage at the media, because I wasn't to the point where I was blaming the media yet. I actually still blame the Mets for these snafus. And but maybe it's interesting. I was thinking when you were talking about the unfettered access, and that the media is kind of spoiled, they expect that and they're spoiled by that. But I think we all are with the internet and the nonstop 24-hour news. I remember having to read Baseball Weekly or check the newspapers to get this kind of information. And so like now it's like everything's in real time. And so they have to keep I remember just yesterday, they said that deGrom was not going to need to go on the IL, but that, that he had some tightness and he might, have a delayed next start. And now today, like, oh, he's going on the IL, but maybe he'll only miss one start. So you feel a little jerked around as a fan. I've only been a Mets fan, so I don't know if that's different for other teams. I hope I addressed at least some of the stuff.
You know what? And I don't necessarily even disagree with you, because like I said, in the open, the Mets have not done a lot to build up equity with the media in terms of the way
you did say that.
And I'm also a Jets fan, which I know you're not, but the Jets are the same thing in New York. The Jets are the same old Jets, same old Mets. That's what everybody always says. And so I don't necessarily hold the media accountable for the way, for doing it. It's the way that they're doing it. It's the way that they're going about it. I saw somebody the other day, a lot of beat reporters tweeted out when taking Met fans to task over the fact that some Met fans were booing Lindor, which I wouldn't do. I don't think you boo a guy 23 games into a 10-year deal. But
I think you do. In New York, when he's already got the deal signed. What you don't do is boo Piazza before he signed the extension, or before he signed a contract. That was stupid. That made me upset. But I think Lindor, it's like, welcome to New York. This is what happens when, he's getting a taste early. And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but with Lindor, I'm just not worried for a second, and I never have been. I've never hit the panic button on this Lindor thing. He's too good. It's too long of a contract for him to stay. Like, even if he did this this year, I wouldn't really be worried about him, because he's just too good, and his attitude's too good, and you see he's already getting the ship righted. But I never thought. I was more worried about friends. Like, I'm getting texts from people, from like a specific friend who's a Giants fan, who's like giving me, Lindor's failing texts and sending me his stats updates and stuff. And I'm like, and I'm like, okay, that's what I'm dreading, is having to hear about it.
Right.
I'm never worried about him. He's just too good of a player.
Well, I wasn't worried about him either, and I'm a big proponent. I don't think that you shouldn't boo your own guys and stuff. I think you can boo performance. I don't think you should boo preemptively. So like, if Lindor comes up and it's it's game 5 of the season and the bases are loaded and he hits into a double play and ends the inning. You want to boo the performance. You could boo that. I don't care if
are they booing him as he's like getting in the box before?
Yeah, they were. I mean, when he was mired in that deep 0 for 24 or 27, whatever it wound up being, when he was in the middle of that, he was getting booed at the beginning, like in his first at bat, like on his way up to the plate. And I just think that's absurd because it's the guys on your team.
Funny. Yeah, that's not good. That's not helping. That's
no, not at all.
Doing.
And it's about the situation. It's about the situation too. Like, look, if it's a 0-0 game and it's the bottom of the first inning and there's 2 outs and he comes up, nobody on base and hits a ground ball out, like you don't need to boo him. What's the point?
Yeah, I agree. That's for Phillies fans. That kind of booing is for Phillies fans. It's not like I'm not, because most markets you don't get booed. Like the home players never get booed. I think that Lindor said he had never been booed. I don't know. I'm trying to remember if it was anywhere but in Cleveland for sure. He had never been booed in Cleveland, not even one time. It's just not how. So he knows what he's getting into. That's kind of one of the most notorious downside to play in New York, or an upside if you look at it as motivation, that you're going to get booed when you're not doing well. But I think I've always felt, or maybe it's justification, that the Mets fans did practical booing, respectful booing as opposed to just chaos. Like I was watching the Mets in Philly the other day. Literally, the fans booed the win. I don't know I forget if we talked about that. There was a moment where somebody, I forget who was at the bat at the plate for the Mets, but somebody stepped out of the box, and because it was such a strong gust of wind, so the guy stepped out of the box, and the catcher blew over. Like he had to reset, and then the fans booed. And I think that they thought they were booing the guy for stepping out and delay, but God, I wish I remember who was played. But it's in essence, they were booing the wind. It's like, know what you're booing, do it effectively. Yeah. But like, and it's funny because I think I told you I watch just about every game that I at least have it on in the background. I try to get 162 games a year in, but like I hadn't noticed that with Lindor. I heard the broadcasters talking about it, the preemptive booing, because that's not. But
It's not. It isn't very Mets-like, I don't think, because I do think we're a pretty knowledgeable fan base on the whole. But what the thing I was trying to say was that
everybody's rusty at seeing live sports. We forgot.
That's true. That's true. After a year and a half, you're kind of like, listen, I'll just boo anything. I don't care.
Not just the players. We're in a slump too.
But what the correlation I was trying to make was that, like, during that stretch, you'd see beat reporters like, oh, you can't boo this guy, he just got here. Meanwhile, then, 10 minutes later, they would tweet, like David Lennon, who covers them for Newsday, tweeted something like, I don't know, man, I get serious Jason Bay vibes when I see Lindor. The guy's been here for 8 minutes. You want to compare him to the worst signing in franchise history? Like,
you think Bay was worse than Mo Vaughn? Or Bay was worse than Bobby Bonilla?
No, I mean, Bay was real bad. I mean, a little bit of hyperbole saying the worst signing in franchise history, but Bay was bad. Bay was real bad.
There's a couple. Alomar was bad. What's his face? Blacked him out. The second baseman that we gave all that money. We gave him 4 years. What was it?
Carlos Baerga?
No. Wait, who? No,
Carlos Baerga?
No. I love Baerga. He was great.
Luis Castillo. It had to be Castillo.
Luis Castillo. That was a bad. That was also a bad contract. But yeah, I guess it depends if you're talking about money. Money wasted or heartache. Heartache caused. But that's Jason Bay. But Jason Bay was never the player Lindor was to begin with.
Exactly.
I mean, he was never the caliber of player or signing. Just because it's that's a really bad analogy. But I think of Alomar as the guy that worried me, a guy that was clearly one of the best players of his generation and just never could play in New York. And for him, it's just it's a risky thing for anybody in any of the big four sports to sign that long of a contract in New York City for any of the teams there, having never played, because I guess you could always trade or but it's not like it's not, start off, it's a different market. And, like a guy like Alomar just never figured it out. Sometimes that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's where my point goes to the fact that it's the media's irresponsibility, because they'll tell you like, hey, you can't treat it like the guy just got here, give him some time. And then they'll turn around and tweet something so irresponsible like, oh, well, he reminds me of Jason Bay. And it's just like, you can't have it both ways. Buster Only tweeted today about the deGrom injury. He was like, well, it just seems as though, the Mets are holding something back or not giving you the whole truth. And maybe they are, but to say that the Mets are doing something wrong by putting their ace pitcher who was hurt, who had to be held back, who got held back again, then he tried to pitch through it, obviously couldn't pitch through it. He winds up on the IL. They say there's no structural damage from the MRI. So, I think they gave you all the information. They don't need justification to be like, hey, we've got 2 off days this week. If we backdate the injured list stint until Sunday, which they're going to do tomorrow when it becomes official, he's only going to miss 1 start if he's on there for 10 days. So I just think, for a team that's mishandled injuries horrifically for the better part of a decade, to all of a sudden see them go, hey, you know what? Let's just sit the guy down for 10 days. The media's like, what are they doing? I can't believe they're doing this.
Yeah, he's just, I think a lot of it is a function of him just being such an important player. When's the last time the Mets had the best player in the game? Maybe when Dwight, at his position, even maybe Dwight Gooden. I'm trying to think, who was the last time that we had, a Michael Jordan kind of player. I can't, it's really, so they don't really, the media and maybe the team doesn't, it's new territory. Tom Seaver, I guess. That was a different universe.
Look, you're right about that. I mean, we haven't had a pitcher the caliber of what deGrom's showing us since Gooden, and obviously his star was fleeting. And then, before that, Seaver and everything that, went down with Seaver where they traded him and never should have. And I guess to your point, it's true. I mean, we've had great ball players usually later on in their career, but we've never had we haven't had the guy who you could say is the absolute best at something, probably since Piazza, because Piazza was the consensus.
Piazza was the best offensive catcher, and also vastly underrated at calling a baseball game. But that's a different conversation. But
that always bothered me. By the way, that always bothered me because he couldn't throw a lick, and we all admit
throw runners out. And that was his Achilles heel. But it was really his only. He wasn't a bad defensive catcher otherwise.
Not at all.
And every pitcher, I mean, to a man, said they loved working with him, and he was just, a brilliant quarterback. So,
exactly.
In the Hall of Fame,
decent at blocking balls in the dirt, and he was good. He was good at getting out of the crouch and going and getting, those tricky foul ball pop-ups where you got to flip around. He was not a lumbering back there. The problem
not a liability at the position, except if you want to steal it, unless you want to catch a runner stealing. But
then he was the biggest liability one.
You just got to call the right pitches on the next batter,
Exactly. Yeah. It's just, you know what though, and it's funny because certain guys get criticized and certain guys don't. So Pudge Rodriguez, for all of his accolades, people made a thing about it, but he never really got criticized for the fact that some of his pitchers didn't like pitching to him because with guys on base, he would just call fastball because he wanted to be able to throw the guy out at second. And so, pitchers made us think about it, but, then it doesn't get covered the same. They're like, oh, this guy's brilliant. And they're like, oh, Piazza sucks, though. It's like, no, you can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
You got to call it like it is.
Yeah, it's funny because then maybe I haven't been – I try to read up. I haven't really seen the kerfuffle that you described with the deGrom thing. I guess I'm not seeing I didn't know that there was really a controversy there about that the Mets were really catching heat for how they'd handled the injury. I think maybe some of it's just frustration. You got to think some of these beat guys. I think they're fans, right? I don't think they're just guys that get those jobs.
Some of them are. I think some of them are the exact opposit of fans.
I think
some of them live. I think some of them.
You think they want to see? They're Yankees fans that want to see us.
Not that they're necessarily fans of other teams. I think some of the beat reporters look at it and go, well, my job is easier if the Mets are bad because the Mets have been historically.
For sure.
Yeah, so I think it's more
it's easier, right? And, bad news sells more papers than good news. And, it's like, what are you going to, what's the headline? Mets handled the DeGrom injury perfectly,
Right.
You don't click on that. You keep moving. Okay, we're good. We're safe there. Good to know. Well, let's read about Donnie more. I'm gonna click on this Diesel Donnie article.
Well, and I think some of it could be a little bit of maliciousness, for lack of a better word, coming from the whole McNeil-Lindor fight where,
we should talk about that too. But I have a question for you, to catch up. Aside from the way the media has handled the injury, how do you feel? Are you worried about it? Are we worried about cause I feel a little nervous because of my history. I'm so gun shy with like, you said you feel like they've handled it well or better than they've handled, past situations. But part of me is like, it keeps getting like, oh, he's not going to go on the, oh, he is, but it's maybe going to be, they keep kind of like moving the goalposts to the point where I'm like, maybe I do need to worry. All of a sudden it's 3 starts later and Syndergaard's back before deGrom, and nothing would shock me with him, like I just don't, just like with Carrasco, they said, oh, he's good to go. He's ahead of schedule, and he was actually throwing at live batters, and then they extended him,
Yeah,
they extended it.
Yeah, right. To answer your question, I would be worried if at the end of the 10 days he doesn't come off the DL. So if he doesn't make his next scheduled start, which I guess would be 8 days from tomorrow, I'm
not worried about that. If he misses one start, well, because they've said that already. They've already lubed me up for that.
And I think at that point, then it becomes, oh, there's more here. There's more than meets the eye. There's more than they're saying. And so, I think that's when I would be bothered by it if in, 8 days from now, he's not out there making a start, or at least, maybe the rotation sets up a little different. He goes on the 9th day, whatever. But if he doesn't come off the IL when he's supposed to, then I'll be worried about it. Today, right. I'm not worried. Also, because I'm just trying to lean into a little bit of the positivity. Like, you said it yourself. Like you told me before we went on that you're a skeptical Met fan and you're a pessimistic Met fan, and I've got a lot of that too. And so I'm just looking into the fact that, look, we're in first place. I know it's early, but we won 5 in a row. Like, there's gonna be heartache this season. God knows we already started with enough bad stuff going on, with them not hitting and barely playing. So I'm just trying to lean into any of the positivity. So 5 in a row.
And there's been a ton. Yeah, I think you're arguably. I mean, it depends if you go by 5 in a row or the what I haven't. I don't know. I haven't, not accounting for today's games. I don't know if any have completed, but I think St. Louis was 8-2 in their last 10. They had the best, a 10-game record, and we had the best, the longest streak. So, arguably we're the hottest team in baseball. I mean, and I guess your point is that's not the story. That's not, those are the headlines we're getting right now, and they
exactly.
should be. And Lindor's fun. You could feel it. That game where he hit the home run, like it wasn't, all the McNeil stuff aside, you could just feel like it wasn't just, the at bats started, it wasn't just the numbers. Like there was an energy, there was like a shift that you could feel, like there was a corner being turned, just like a swagger that he all of a sudden, it really did. That was a really watermark moment for him, I felt like.
Oh yeah, I mean that's his signature moment as a Met right now. I mean, hopefully he has bigger ones than that. But...
Yeah, totally. And you know what I kept thinking is, because that tied the game, as you remember, and then we won an extra innings, and I thought, like, this is going to be so Met if we lose. If we, it's going to be so the Andy Chavez catch, only to lose the game anyway. That's going to, like, not that the stakes are obviously much lower, but like this is so typical that he finally has his moment, and it only ties the game. Like I've just learned not to be. I wasn't celebrating it, but I was happy for him, and but I really feel like he's. I don't know that he's all of a sudden going to turn into fucking Tony. Sorry, that he's going to turn into Tony Gwynn. But I think that I'm not. I think the slump, we can say, is over. The horrific. I love the other day, by the way. Did you catch when Keith Hernandez said he was in Mirkwood Forest? I'm a Lord of the Rings fan as well. Shocking. I have Darth Vader on a unicorn behind me. But like, I thought it was so cool. And then he messed up though. And then Gary's like, is that a real place? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, but it was the Hobbits. It's Tolkien. The Hobbits went there. They ran into trouble with the trolls. Not what happened. They did not run into. There was woodland elves and spiders in Mirkwood Forest. The trolls were before the Mirkwood. But I was still impressed that Keith even knew that or dropped that reference, which is another thing.
Doesn't surprise me.
Even I talked about it. As pessimistic as I can be, and it's kind of like, a self-hating Mets fan as I can be, and part of that's just, I'm self-hating Jew, so that transfers into everything I do, and all my fanships and loyalties are tinged with self-hatred. But like, geez, I lost my train of thought like an idiot. What was I saying?
You were saying that the self-deprecating, self-doubting Mets fan in you.
No, but the one thing that I'm very confident in saying, and it's not, I think I'm not a biased, like, the Mets S doesn't stink kind of fan, as like I'm saying, is we have the best broadcast booth, maybe in sports. And it's unreal how good we are compared to everybody else. With MLB TV, bless you. Jesus, could you cover your nose? My son literally sneezed 6 feet and landed on me. That's
That can get you arrested if you do it out in public nowadays.
Yeah,
you can't just
right.
You can't be. You got to tell him you can't be freeballing your sneezes. You can't. You got to cover it up.
The thing is, he's an anti-vaxxing Trump supporter, so I'm not convinced it wasn't intentional. It's like literally on the. Oh my god! But yeah, I think we have. Just Gary, Keith, and Ron is such an unprecedentedly good broadcast booth. I feel so blessed, and also just the SNY broadcast. Everybody's on these dumb Bally Sports, and through the years, it's been Fox Sports and Comcast Sports, and these different kind of. And the Mets, and I guess if you're a Yankees fan, the Yes Network is similar, but that we're not on some kind of just like, cookie cutter, sports that we have. It's such a unique, and there's so it's just a different class, like that's the other, like that's the one thing besides deGrom, the one thing we have the best at, and Gary Cohen specifically, all three of us.
Yeah, they're fantastic. I'll tell you a funny story. So right before I moved here in the summer, before I moved to Los Angeles in the summer of 2019, I went to a Mets game, and it was just through a whole situation. I got to go on the field for batting practice, and then I got to go in the booth and meet Gary, Keith, and Ron. And
no way.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I have met Keith before because I've done some events with Keith, actually for the QBC. So, and I've met Keith Hernandez now at this point, I think 3 or 4 times. And one time it was like within a month of each other. And like the guy has no recollection. Every time I see him, it's as if like we've never seen each other before. Now I understand he's famous and I'm nobody, but
you're not Elaine Bennett,
Yeah, but he had no idea. Like, I literally was at this game in the booth.
Were you working?
People. What?
Were you like in a professional context? Were you there working or just visiting? Or
so yeah, well, that's what's funny. So earlier in the summer of 19, I worked an event with him at like the end of June. Right. Uh-huh. And I was in a working professional setting with him. I was introduced to him. I was co-hosting the show, the whole thing. And then like 3 weeks later, I'm in the booth. One of 3 people. Now that was not a professional setting, but I was introduced to him.
You're like, what's up? Good to see you again. He's like, who the hell are you? Also, you're talking about a man who just learned this season that PB&J stands for peanut butter and jelly,
That's true.
Or at least he's convinced he learned this season. I'm not. I think he's probably learned that several times in his life, just like he's met you 3 or 4 times, for the first time.
Well, that's the thing about Keith, when you were like,
as someone that's done a lot of cocaine, I can just tell you that like it's not his fault.
Well, and that's the thing about Keith when you were like, I'm surprised he knew the Lord of the Rings reference. It's like, I'm not surprised, but I'm also equally not surprised he did not know who I was, from 2
weeks. This is my ex-wife used to make these things. This is a Keith Hernandez like robot she made. She made a cigarette for that. There's that famous picture of him in the dugout smoking the cigarette, and I was always obsessed with that photo. It was like my profile pic. So she made this for me for a present when it was the Keith Hernandez. Does it say? It says 17 on it too.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm giving my ex-wife. Let me just want to shout out my ex-wife. What's up? She's not even a Mets fan, but I just think that's so cool.
I mean, no, that's super cool and creative. And
she actually made him the Velcros on and off the cigarette. Okay.
So when I go out, I go up in the booth, and this is my 5th time meeting Keith, but my first time meeting the other 2 guys, and I had a ball, and I was like, look, I was like, after we talked to them for like 5 or 10 minutes, I was like, would it be cool if I got an autograph from the best booth in baseball? Mm-hmm. And without missing a beat, Ron Darling is like, yeah, that's fine. Let me go see if the Atlanta Braves guys are busy.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
I was like, that's a great joke. His timing was on point.
That is. Hey, there was a time where they were that old TBS booth, Yeah. I don't know. Maybe you're too young to remember, but with Don Sutton and the guy, Skip Carey, I remember, I was so sick of hearing them by the end of their, just because we all, I don't know if you were, I don't know your age, and I'm not going to make you say it on the air, but like, before the internet, and you really just were forced to watch whatever was on television. Like I grew up in the Bay Area, Mets fan, but most of them, I only got to see them when they were on either a national game in the playoffs or something, or the ABC game of the week or whatever it was at that time. And then when they played the Giants, and they didn't play the A's back then, there was no interleague, so it was like TBS was like a main, so that was a main source of baseball. So the whole country had to watch so many Braves and Cubs games. We didn't get WGN, but I know other areas did. So I was just like, for me, it was just, I was a Mets fan that got stuck watching the Giants and the Braves all the time, and it was really painful. So I hated it, but looking back and seeing like I feel like there's just a generic, everybody. It's funny because sports broadcasting, it's become so kind of like zippity, like Stuart Scott, the late great Stuart Scott. He kind of changed the game for everybody. I know he was a news anchor, but like there's this kind of new like where you throw in hip hop slang and it's not. There used to be a bit, kind of a Vin Scully, like Red Barb or whatever, the guy in the it was a classier kind of. Now it's like it's just like a snazzier kind of like young guy jock bro energy to broadcasting that I don't like as much. I just feel like we don't have.
Have you ever watched Brockmire?
Which one? Which team? Who's that? No, I don't know what that is.
Brockmire's it's a show. It was on IFC for like 5 years.
Oh no.
Yeah,
I don't know about it.
It's okay. So you should look it up. It's on Hulu now. Hank Azaria plays an old school baseball announcer, and it's just so irreverent and hilarious. But it's packaged around baseball. So if you're a big baseball fan like you are, like I am,
I don't know about it.
Yeah, you got to give it a shot. I only just watched it. Yeah, I only just watched it for the first time like a couple months ago, and it just ended. I think it ended, in the spring of 2020 was the final season. So it was on for like 5 years, but, they're 30-minute episodes. You can breeze through the thing like, in a couple sittings, and it's really funny. And Hank Azaria is hilarious.
I'm a fan, and it's hard not to like him. That's funny. Wow.
Yeah, you should check it out. And it's one of those shows, too, that you'll know if you like it from the pilot. Like, you'll watch the first episode, and you'll know you don't need a lot of growing into it. It's like you watch it, and if you like the pilot, you'll like the premise. If you don't, you won't. I'm
the kind of person, once I start a show, I'm just such a like weird obsessive completionist. Like I can hate it in 5 minutes. I'm like, great, now I have to watch 23 episodes of the show. I just can't. Once I start, I can't turn back.
I do the same thing. Like there's so many shows I have watched.
I hate Ray Donovan. I hated it right away, and I was just like rooting for it to get canceled. Like every time they'd renew it, I'd be like, oh yeah, it's like 8 more hours of my life next year I got to spend watching that crap. Eventually I did quit that one. It was so bad, but I was surprised. I made it like 4 or 5 seasons in before I actually. Dude, it was one of those like the Sandler joke on the new. Did you see the new Sandler special, which is made surprisingly great? When he's talking about when he's wiping his butt, he's just like, "I'm done after this one on principle." Like if I don't care, whatever happens, happens. It was like that. I had that moment with Ray Donovan. It's like I don't care if they bring it back. I'm not watching. I'm done. Like that was my last season, for better or worse.
Well, I gotta ask you this, because you mentioned something before about your brother being a Padres fan and you being a Mets fan, but yet you're both from the Bay Area. So how did that happen? How did you become one splitting the fandom, but also not rooting for a team that is entrenched in the area that you're from? That is a historical team and a successful team.
I might be the most interesting Mets fan on the planet in my origin story, not in anything, in any other way. I never met Keith Hernandez for the first time 4 times or anything like that. but like I know I'm sure there are comparable stories, but I don't encounter them. My father was born and raised in Brooklyn as a diehard Brooklyn Dodger fan. He was born in 1943, so you can imagine what era he was there for. And that was really a big deal for him. So I guess they left in 57. He would have been 14 years old. So he was devastated by that and never forgave them and hated the Dodgers for leaving. But he also hated the Giants just on principle. He carried that, hating them while they were New York rivals. He carried that to the Bay Area. So even though he loved my mother was a San Francisco native, and I'm a 3rd generation San Francisco native, which is actually rare. It's a very small city, and there's not a lot. It's like New York. There's not a lot of actual natives. I grew up in the city, in public schools, not the suburbs. I'm very proud of that. So and it's like you said, it's a very historic, entrenched team, and our dad was kind of a jerk move. He just like robbed us of that pride because I grew up at Candlestick with our dad just brainwashing us to hate the Giants from birth. Really, he should have said, "Look, I hate him, but this is your city. You should get into him." But it wouldn't have been, And my father was a big baseball fan, and that was, that's for a lot of kids or boys. I think their dad is their intro into sports, and he was kind of our sports hero. And but it's funny, he would take us to the game and he would just talk so much crap. Like I remember him telling us there was a guy, Tom O'Malley, who played for the Giants. He said Tom O'Malley's the worst player in baseball, but he just said it like it was a fact, not like it was his opinion. Like it's amazing, that guy. He is hands down the worst player. There's no way he could even know that, my father. But then we went to school and told our friends that, like it was, no, Tom O'Malley, worst player in baseball. I don't even remember what position he played or what he did. But so we were kind of on our own fending for teams because he didn't have a favorite team. It's that weird. There's a lost generation of Brooklyn Dodger fans where he didn't. He went off and moved to California and he wasn't there when the Mets came. He didn't. So that didn't replace. So he just loved baseball, but he didn't have a team. He had like 3 teams he hated: the Giants, Dodgers, and Yankees. But he didn't love a team. He just kind of watched from an objective fan point of view. And I think he thought it was funny to brainwash his little twin sons into hating the local team. And he died a long time ago. And I'm resentful of that. Like, the Giants won 3 titles. That's my city. I should be celebrating. And it was the worst moment of my, it's like the insufferableness of it, of having to have so many Giants fan friends I got to hear about. So my story with the Mets was, we used to go to New York for Passover every year to see his side of the family, who they were all living on Long Island at that time. And I was out there, that's Passover's around when baseball season's starting. And there was a commercial on television that was, for the Mets, the kind of like, oh, the season's coming up, get your season tickets or whatever, come out to the ballpark. And I remember it was just like a montage of Mets hitting home runs and making diving catches and kind of standard fare. And they were playing the song "The Boys Are Back in Town," but not the Thin Lizzy one. I think that's the original. It was the Bus Boys, the black group, who actually was from the movie 48 Hours and also the beginning of Eddie Murphy Delirious, which I was obsessed with. So it was like, I already loved that song, and it was just the Mets, the boys are back in town, baseball. And I was like, blue and orange, that's cool. I don't know. I didn't, the Yankees, I hated them on instinct, and my dad hated the Yankees, so that wasn't an option. So it was just like, oh, and I always had this kind of pride of having this New York Jewish roots, even though I grew up on the West Coast. So it just clicked. I just made that decision in that moment. I'm a Mets fan, my little 10-year-old brain. And I got back home, and I just like this absurd, obscene loyalty to it ever since. And I think my second season as a fan, we won the title. And that's really that's really the only time until the LA Kings won in 2012. And I was a recent Kings fan as a transplant here. I'd never had my team win. And I always say that the 3 best moments of my life are, Game 6, Game 7 of 1986, then my kids being born, and I don't care what order it picks. I have 2 of them. But yeah, so and then my brother
places. People talk about like kids. I don't have any kids, but people talk about like, oh, my kids. But it's like, man, the joy of an 11-year-old kid yourself,
man,
watching your team in the World Series, like that is hard to top.
I had say in making the kids. I did that. Like I don't have any control over the Mets. I have to, that's just like hitting the slot machine, every year. So it's more of a win. But I can make more kids now. I can make more now if I want. I can't conjure up another Mets title.
Exactly.
I would have done it by now. Yeah. Exactly. And my brother was so weird. He actually picked the Padres, and we'd never even been to San Diego. Had no family there, no connection. We were watching Twib. Is that still on, This Week in Baseball with Mel Allen? And at that time, Goose Gossage had joined the Padres. And our father just, he had told us who he was, because I think he played for the Giants before or after that. I think after that. But he played for the Yankees. And he's just like, our dad kind of hyped him up as this interesting player. We were little, so there was like a WWE, or at that time WWF factor to the Gossage, because he's just a mustache. The fact that his name was Goose, he seemed like a legitimately scary guy. I'm sure he wasn't, but like at that time, it seemed like, wow, this guy's actually. I think the hitters might be afraid of him, And they had cool colors. My brother was like, there's a guy named Goose Gossage on this, and then with him. His first year as a fan, they went to the World Series in '84, and we just have this weird, absurd loyalty to these teams all these years later. But the Mets thing, it's in my blood. It's not even something I can. It's automatic. You could like take any team and put them in the Mets uniform and field them as them. It's just like this weird loyalty to the logo and the concept of the team. It's interesting.
Well, it's actually not that dissimilar from why I'm a Mets fan. The difference being is that I was born and raised in New York City, so I had that connection. But, my grandfather, who showed me everything about baseball, he was born in the 20s, and he grew up a Brooklyn Dodger fan. He grew up literally steps away from Ebbets Field, like blocks away.
No, my father would talk about. I wonder if your grandfather's my father's age. That would make me feel old. But my father said you see him in the neighborhood. You see they all live in the neighborhood. Yeah.
Exactly. And so he said the same thing. And I remember he always said to me, he was like, look, when I was growing up, there were 3 teams in New York. You loved one and you hated the other 2. And so he was a Dodgers fan. And, when the Dodgers left, you couldn't, in 1956, you couldn't follow a team on the other coast. There was no Sports Center. There was no MLB package. So what he started to do was
he couldn't even do it in 1986.
Yeah, exactly. So he started he started watching the Yankees just because he loved baseball, but like he had no connection to them. He had no affinity to them. And so then once the Mets became a thing, he became a Mets fan because unlike your dad, he was there and was like, well, this is my team now. And then, and then I was born and everybody in my family's a Mets fan because of that reason. But it's also a little bit of the reason why I don't root for the Dodgers. I don't like the Dodgers at all, but as two guys talking to each other here in Los Angeles, I do have this kind of like, it's cool like that the Dodgers left from Brooklyn and I left from Brooklyn and I live here. So I do have this weird, like, they're not the team I hate the
Dodgers
most.
Just because I grew up hating the Giants, brainwashed hate the Giants, that like I had this affinity for the Dodgers just because Giants fans hate them so much. But there's like this kind of, as a salty Mets fan, when the Dodgers are doing really well, I do kind of root against. It was fun to watch them lose in the World Series a couple of years in a row, just to like have all my friends at the bar. But I don't want them celebrating in my face. So just like I
feel that same way.
Like, hey, welcome to the losers club, guys.
I feel that exact same way. Like I won't root. I never rooted against the Dodgers unless they were playing the Mets until the Dodgers got like real good. Like
when they get far,
when Frank McCourt owned the team and they were like going bankrupt, I was like, oh man, that sucks. That's so bad. Now they got Magic Johnson. They got every player in the world. They get Mookie Betts. I'm like, enough.
Too much. Just like too much winning. It's just like, I didn't sign up for this. I don't want to. This is too much happiness for people that don't root for my team, But it's funny because I grew up going to New York every year, but our family was weird and wouldn't take us into the city, and none of them were Mets fans, although a couple of them are Mets fans now, but they certainly weren't into it when I was a kid. But I didn't get myself to a game until the last year. When Shea was closing, it was just like this thing hanging over my head. Like, I can't believe I've never been, I've seen the Mets a million times at Candlestick, or not a million, but they used to come more than once a year. And I go to just about every game. And then I've seen them at Dodger Stadium. And it just was like, and actually in Oakland also, but I had never seen a baseball game in New York. And I thought when they were, opening up City, I was just like, I can't never go to Shea. So I made like a pilgrimage and went out there just to go to Shea in the last season. And so I was only, I went to like the whole series. I forget who they played. I want to say, might have been the Angels, might have been the Interleague. No, it was the Marlins. Anyway, but yes, and then I've been to Citifield a bunch, but like because I've ended up going to New York comedy and taking me to New York in my comedy life. But for me, it was such a crazy experience. Like, you take that for granted. Like, if you grow up a diehard fan of a team in a market where you don't live, and especially like before, and most of that time was spent without the internet. It was so weird to just like, I was so used to being the guy in the Mets hat and shirt surrounded in a sea of Giants fans or a sea of Dodger fans. So like the fact, like, just to hear the crowd cheer when we do something good, or just everyone's wearing the same colors as me, or that I can turn to the guy next to me and have a conversation about, did you see what happened last night or whatever. It felt like, like a nerd's first time at Comic-Con or something. I was just like, wow, I can't believe this has been happening this whole time. Like, I just felt like I was on this island by myself of Mets fanship. So that was pretty cool. And I get that. Yeah. When this is over, I can't wait to get back out.
It was pretty quiet in the comments, but we got a few coming in the last couple of minutes. So I just want to shout them out. Keith Blacknick, who's behind the scenes at the Queens Baseball Convention channel, he said, "Root for the laundry, not the players." Going back to what you were saying before, you could put anybody in there. You just got the loyalty to it. And then,
like I always hated Derek Jeter. I'm like, put him in a Mets uniform. He's my favorite player. I don't hate the guy. I hate the laundry.
Exactly. And Keith, who's like a Queens guy through and through, said he hates the Dodgers since 1988, which is a good reason to hate the Dodgers if you've never lived out here and stuff.
Dude, this shirt is a vintage 1988, by the way. I don't know if this is printed. This is a 1988. That's the worst. Yeah. That's the worst.
Yeah, no, and I obviously know that. I did not, technically I lived through it, but I did not experience, I was 2 years old in 1988, so I did not get the benefit of the 86 championship run, and I did not get the letdown of, the subsequent years, specifically 88.
That's interesting. I would definitely make the trade. It's a worthy trade. As bad as 88 sucked, it was worth it for 86. To be alive for the title, I hope that you get to experience that someday. And Steve Cohen says 5 years. What did you say, 5 years?
5 years. Within 5 years was his goal.
5 years. And, although when I moved to LA, I had a manager. So I'd just like to be working like as a regular job in TV, like, within 5 years. And he goes, I'm going to do it for you in 1 year. That was 14 years ago.
Oh my God! And that was before
We'll see,
that was before COVID. That was
and that was a very still, and we're friends now, but we're not. He's not. We don't work together anymore. But we're still friends. Very reputable. I won't say his name, but a very like well-known A-list comedy manager. You know? How about 1 year? How was 1 year sound, buddy? Man, sure. Like, okay, Steve Cohen. Should I just buy my Mets 2023 championship hat now?
Keith Blacknick said, I was 12, so he's right around the same age as you. And he said, you're excused for being 2. I appreciate that. Thank you for excusing me for being 2 years old. But I've always had this weird birthright connection to the Mets because I was born on October 15th, 1986, which is the day. That's the day of Game 6 versus the Astros.
That's insane.
Yeah. So,
Game 6. Sorry, I'm not a crazy date. I don't know all the dates of the games. Pardon me.
I only know that one because it's my birthday.
That was a great Game 6. Also, that was. I mean, I remember that whole series was just unnecessarily exciting. That '86 Astros series. It didn't need to be that exciting.
Keith saying, "I will have you in the TV biz within 1 year." I mean, Best Buy.
Unfortunately, they turned down my application as well.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough out there right now.
Yeah.
Let's
they said try Circuit City, but apparently it's closed.
Let's switch gears. I actually used to work at Best Buy when I was in college. Let's switch gears real quick to just because I want to take some of this positivity that we've been talking about and talk about the current Mets team. So I opened with it 5 in a row. They're back in first place. It's real early. It's not even Memorial Day, which is the benchmark for a lot of Major League Baseball seasons. But how do you feel about the team right now? Like just as taking in everything, taking in the Lindor slump, and we could even factor in, deGrom right now at this moment is hurt. He's on the IL. But how do you feel about the team? Like you said, you watch every game. I watch every game. Where's your gut?
Question. That's a good question. I feel better than I felt for years. I don't look at this team and say this is a championship team, but I don't necessarily think that this team can't win a championship. But I don't. It seems like. And we made a lot of acquisitions, and we're clearly, going in the right direction. And I think we made more moves than anyone else this offseason, didn't we? Or actually, more. Yeah. And I think we're getting there. I think this looks like the team that maybe. I love the core of like Alonso and McNeil and Lindor because I do have faith. And of course we're a team built on pitching now. I don't like there's got you got deGrom, and that worries me because the run support story just doesn't seem like it's going away. And then the other guys are good, but I don't like Stroman. I want to love Stroman. I just don't feel like, and I didn't follow him very closely before he came to the Mets. I didn't know him well, so I don't know that I'm feeling like that's going to be a reliable. The way he started out, he was like that he put his numbers up the first 2 or 3 starts next to deGrom, they look the same. I don't know that I trust. It's not like having that like Glavine Maddox, the third guy, Smoltz rotation. Like we don't have that, and that's really as good as. I think that's when I'm going to feel. If Noah's healthy and pitching well, and deGrom can get some run support, because there's a way too long an answer. I feel good about the team.
Yeah,
better than I felt for a long time. Not like I'm still skeptical.
That's a good way to put it, though. I tend to agree with you.
And I think we need a better manager. And I have nothing against Luis Rojas. He's doing a great job, and I know the players love him. I think he's out of his depth a little bit. I think he could be a great manager one day. This is not the market to get your first gig. I know we had to do that last year because of the Beltran situation, and I'm actually glad I don't Beltran 2006. Then he goes and gets a title. Not his fault, but he gets a title with St. Louis, playing with Wainwright, they're like, I just don't like any of that. Then he went to the Giants, who I hate. Didn't he play for the Yankees also? Am I making that up? He did. Yeah. I just hate everything. So, and I hate his mole. I don't mean to mole shame him, but I think the mole is evil. I think it has a plot to take over the earth, maybe the galaxy. He's obviously a great baseball player, and I think in a way he's a good family dude. And I'm joking about. I don't really want to disparage the guy, but I didn't think that just felt like a bad. He's not the best. I don't have positive memories of him. When I think he had some great moments for the Mets, but when I think about his last at bat, it's such a horrible scar of a memory that I thought okay, cool. This is actually, there's a silver lining to him leaving and this Rojas guy getting a shot. But I just feel like he'd be great in Arizona or a team that's or building or rebuilding or building it's just not. Maybe it's not even just the level of how good we are. It's the market. I just feel like we should have a. Like, I know we wanted Girardi and went to Philly, but like that's the kind of guy, you know, somebody at least like a. I mean, I don't know. Like a Dusty Baker level, someone that's been not Dusty because he's a playoff choker, but you know, like somebody, you know, like a Joe Madden. That would have been my favorite for the Mets,
right?
You know, to bring that zen to New York, and I really think he would have been unflappable in it. And
you do make a lot of good points with it. Specifically, I love the way you started it, where you just said that, you know, I don't think right now this is a championship team, but I'm not saying they can't get there, because I tend to agree with you on that. And I think one of the biggest benefits of the Steve Cohen era is that, you know, we have a ton more depth than we had, you know, ever since the Madoff situation. And that's bench depth, starting pitching depth in the minors. It's all of that. It's not just the big deal to Lindor. It's the other stuff that you can spend money on that they never spent money on. And with that, I think that if they're a piece or two away, they will go get those pieces.
And I have the confidence that, unlike in the Wilpon era, we'll learn from our mistakes. And, you know, at least we potentially, that, you know, that was just such a inept ownership, and you know, just that I don't feel as doomed, like you know, the history is just going to repeat itself forever. I don't have that. I mean, maybe that might turn out to be the case, but I have a sense of optimism in the Cohen era, not because he's so filthy rich, which is great, but just because he's not the Wilpon. And it's just so, like, when you brought up Madoff, that's fun. That was a big, when I was trying to talk about, you know, Mr. Met flipping off fans, Bobby Valentine with the mustache. I mean, I love that story, but just like, we're always in the news for the worst reasons or the wrong reasons. And it's like, that's the Madoff, like, of all the teams in baseball, you know, like the only one that was actually, and that actually affected us, not just like in some, it's a scandalous, it's like that affected what we could spend and how we approach development going forward for years. Like, that affected our on-field performance. Bernie Madoff. Of course, we're the only team in baseball or in pro sports. Like, of all the celebrities and, you know, hedge fund, whoever the, you know, smart people that end up getting ripped off by that guy. The Mets were the one pro sports team.
Well, you know, I hate to dig up old dirt when it comes to Madoff, but, you know, the fact of the matter is, and I think this is part of the reason why Mets fans were so angry with the Wilpons post Madoff, because other teams that had similar scandals either before, after, or during that same time frame, their teams were their owners were forced to sell. Like, we talked about Frank McCourt. Like, Frank McCourt was diving into Dodgers payroll to pay off personal debts and fund his divorce and pay alimony. Now, that's, you could argue, was worse than the Madoff situation, but they made him sell the team. You know, you look in another sport, you look at everything that happened with that racist, awful person, Donald Sterling with the Clippers.
Oh,
you know,
Mark Schott.
Oh, well, Mark Schott too, but like these people were made to sell the team. Like,
she wasn't. She just died, I think. But yeah.
Donald Sterling had to sell the team, and it wasn't even, you know, it wasn't even because of, I mean, the Clippers weren't great under his tenure, but, you know, it wasn't because of a baseball or in that case, a sports thing, a basketball thing, and they made him sell the team. And so I always compare those two situations to what happened with the Mets and Madoff, because, you know,
the Madoff's not evil, though. The racism is evil. The Madoff is just being dumb, or no?
Well, sure, but they're both kind of similar in that, you know, the Mets got involved with something that hurt a lot of people, right? Like, maybe the Mets didn't know, maybe Wilpons didn't know, but they got involved with something that hurt a lot of people, and the Mets really didn't pay steep penalties for it in that sense. The Wilpons didn't. And then on the flip side of it, it screwed up their baseball finances pretty much, like, irrevocably. Like, they could not fix it. And it took them 10 years to sell the team. I mean, that's the reason why. Madoff is why Cohen is the owner now. But they held that thing together with duct tape and wishes for a decade.
That's a good point.
And I think that's why a lot of Met fans look at it and they're like, what the hell, man? Like, these guys are awful. They ran this team into the ground. And they're just, everybody's like,
the thing with Madoff, and I mean, again, you can't just fire people because of, or, you know, or not fire, but, you know, excommunicate people from an industry or a business because of who their friends are. But it wasn't just that they got ripped off by Madoff. They were like buddy. They were in his circle. That's like the kind of people they are. You know, that's like, it's not just like, okay, so it's like a Trump, like if you don't have to be Giuliani, you know what I mean? You don't have to like do that. You know, they might not have been taking part in this, but it's like, you know, that's not like those are the circles they run in. It just didn't feel good being and I said that for people say, how are the Mets going to do this? When people used to ask me this kind of question, what do you think about the Mets? How you feel? There's a guy named Dave Reinitz, he owns Flappers Comedy Club in Burbank. He's a huge Mets fan, and he's the most optimistic Mets fan I know. God bless him. He's always, there's no God, but you get it. But he's always like, this is the year. Are you kidding? Like Jason Bay's looking good. He's just, no matter what's going on, he's just, this is it. I've said for years, they will never win under this ownership. They have no chance to be a real, And so that I don't feel that anymore. So that's what I should have. That was the short answer I should have given. I feel like sky's the limit.
And I want to jump back into the comments because Keith has a lot of stuff to say about a lot of the things we've been talking about. Most recently, he said Wilpons might not have known, but there's a feeling a certain uncle in the organization did. I think he's probably talking about Saul Katz, that maybe he had some kind of connection into what, Madoff was actually doing. And that's the thing, like you said, these are guys that kind of got duped, but they're also people you expect to know better. I mean, they're New York City billionaires, so did they get taken a little bit? But like, if you're, real estate investors and developers, shouldn't you know like a return that's too good to be true when you see it? You know what I mean?
I think it was almost just like, guys, it's Bernie. Just trust me. It's like, hey, Bernie has the con. Bernie's guy. Like, I don't know. It's baffling. They never seemed, especially the kid. With the kid is Jeff, right? I always mix them up. Jeff, but he just seemed daft. Just never, like, just watching them interview, they never seemed like articulate, bright. I always watch, I'm so broke and so smart. Like, I don't know how these, like, I always see these rich people. I'm like, they're not even, like, I probably couldn't even put like a sentence together, on an SAT or something. But like these, I don't know how these guys get so rich. It's just, in Jeff's case, he was born into it, but.
Yeah, that's the old adage everybody used to say, like, Jake was born on third base, so it's a lot easier to, just a couple real quick things from
Mark Cuban would have been, that could have been our savior, Yeah. But and I think they were down to sell, right? If I remember correctly, or am I remembering that wrong? I think that was like, it was baseball. It was the owners that nixed that.
Which one?
Mark Cuban wanted to buy the Mets.
Oh yeah, well, Mark Cuban's been he tried to buy the Cubs at one point, tried to buy the Mets,
right?
And
but I thought
this guy's not good for baseball because it's an old boys club. They don't want a guy like
club. Yeah, exactly, and that's what that's a problem. We've talked a little bit off there the other day about baseball being frustrating in those ways, and it's such an old boys club, and that's why they never force smart shot out. That's why it's kind of a. Yeah, it's like it reminds me, I picture like the baseball owners meeting like the Hudsucker proxy boardroom, It's like a bunch of guys like in a giant, a huge conference table smoking cigars, drinking cognac, They're not exactly like an in touch group of hip, sports owners. When you look at
baseball owners didn't want Cuban, and he's pretty connected when it comes to stuff like that. He knows a few people in the organization and stuff. So, but I was worried that they weren't going to let Cohen in for the same reasons. Like, here's this flashy billionaire, ultra wealthy, buys, the guy's buying, $10 million Basquiat paintings just for a laugh. You know what I mean? Like,
true, but Basquiat's dope though.
Yeah, he is. No, I know. I want Steve Cohen to have like that big, that Biggie Basquiat with the crown. Yeah. I want him to have that in the Mets office.
Better give it to the Basquiat estate or whatever auction house. Better than Madoff. At least he can recoup that if he needs to.
Exactly. Okay,
that's gonna hold its value.
Before we get out of here, the last thing I want to ask you about is something with the upcoming series. We're playing the Baltimore Orioles.
Regular Pantene. Sorry.
We're playing the Baltimore Orioles starting tomorrow. Quick 2-game series. On Wednesday night, the Dark Knight returns.
I know.
Pitching against the Mets. What is your feeling? Obviously you're not going to root for him because he's pitching against the Mets, and I'm not going to root for him against the Mets. But I do, in general, root for Matt Harvey. I think a lot of Met fans give him a bad rep. So what's your feeling? How are you going to rationalize this and reconcile?
I root for. I think anybody. I love a comeback like anybody, and he had such a weird. He had such a weird exit with us and such a weird history. I mean, he was supposed to be deGrom. That he was he was. I think that was in my mind remember when he went on like Jimmy Kimmel and he was like fooling people on Hollywood Boulevard, or was that in New York City? Sorry, in Times Square. Like, what do you think about Matt Harvey? What do you think about Matt Harvey? And they were talking. He's like, he had a good sense of humor, and seemed like really. I really had hopes for him. So I don't just as on a personal level, I liked him. I liked his cockiness, even though he didn't back it up in the end. And he also liked to party, and I like to party, so that's relatable. But it's hard. I want to win because I'm never going to root against the Mets. But I'd like to see him do well. I'd like to see him have a quality start, and when we beat the bullpen. That wouldn't bother me.
Actually, look, if you told me my choices were, the
minimum quality start. What is a quality start? Six innings,
three runs. Yeah.
3 runs. Yeah, exactly that. I want him to get 6 innings, give up 3 runs, and lose the game.
I'm okay with that. Yeah, I'm okay with, and that's kind of what I've decided. Like, look, if you told me, look, you're going to win and you're going to, not blow his doors off, or you're going to lose the game. If those are my choices, I'm rooting for the Mets, of course, 100%. I don't care about Harvey in that sense. But I am rooting for him to come back and get his career back on track in some way. And so, ideally, I'd like to see him pitch pretty well and us just win the game. Whether that means we beat him 2-1 or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't care what the outcome is.
I don't want to shellac him. That's not going to make me feel good. I guess maybe some Mets fans feel that way. We go out there and just shellac him, knock him out in the first inning, get 8 runs. Like I'm just going to feel bad for him. But I felt the same way like when Kerry Wood was came out of nowhere, then he just lost it. And, or remember when Rick Ankiel was the pitcher who lost control, then he came back as a solid outfielder, a center fielder for the Cardinals. And that was I love those stories. So I wish Matt Harvey the best. Just, like anything, I root, no matter how much I like you, when you're playing the Mets, I root against you. But I'm pro Matt Harvey, definitely. And I liked him, and I liked him when he was with us. And I felt it was one of those I never root against in any situation when I feel like when someone's in trouble, like emotionally or in a personal way, and then the media piles on. I don't care if it's Lindsay Lohan or Justin Bieber, or whatever, or Amanda Bynes, like these kid stars, or an athlete, or Antonio Brown. Forget him, but bad example. But like say Aaron Hernandez or people that end up, and I'm not for that. I feel like he's had Jake Lloyd in Star Wars. It's just the kind of, even Rosie Tran. I hate the Disney Star Wars movies, but as soon as someone's getting bullied by the media, I'm on their side.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. I just think that, and also with Harvey, it's one of those things. It's not like we let him go, and he's been just on a tear ever since. He's a guy who's trying to.
Aaron Hernandez was a bad example. Also, he murdered people, but it wasn't his fault. I think it was.
Well, yeah,
and being the closeted gay stuff. But I'm just saying, it didn't help. It doesn't help with the media, or like Mike Tyson. So I totally cut you off, but I just started to have a panicking moment. That I don't know how many people are watching this, but if it's 3, Keith's gonna. This guy supports Aaron Hernandez. Sorry.
No, I will say this, and I don't like Aaron Hernandez because I hate the Patriots, and obviously he's a murderer. But watching that documentary,
the media coverage is horrible. Yeah,
it doesn't excuse the murder, but Aaron Hernandez had a terrible life, and there were a lot of things we did not know about Aaron Hernandez, and I mean we, the general public, stuff that didn't come out about him, stuff that ways he was treated, ways he clearly was never himself at any point. And again, that does not excuse murder. The guy's a murderer, ultimately, whatever. But I do understand your point and why he came off your tongue so easily as somebody that, kind of got this treatment that was a little strange, because he did his whole life up until that point.
Yeah. That's what I meant. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, with regards to Harvey, I just feel as though he's the kind of guy that right now he is fighting for his livelihood. He's fighting for his baseball life. And if the Mets came out and bombed him, and he gave up 8 runs in 2 innings, I don't think he's getting released because he has been good enough so far. But him giving up 8 runs in 2 innings against the Mets would be one step closer to losing his job, even on a bad team. And then he's already had other chances. He may not get another one. And that's why I ultimately, I want the Mets to win however they need to win. But I don't want to see him get his doors blown off, because then he's just one step closer to being out of baseball. And it's just, to me, that's sad, because as a Mets fan who hasn't seen, I didn't see 86. I've seen it since, but some of my biggest joy.
That's a real sore subject for you.
Well, it is.
You brought it up a few times. It was because you're born what year you say you're born?
I'm born in 86.
Right. Oh, on the day. Yeah. So it's just that is so close, but so far. So that's funny. I mean, technically you were alive, but that is so funny. It's that's got to be tough.
Like while I was being born at the hospital, people were watching the game in the waiting room. Like that's what was happening.
That's amazing. You really are born. It really is like a birthright thing for you. You're born into it.
Yeah, it kind of is.
That's wild. That's really cool. That's really cool.
So for me, it's obviously like, it's 2000, which wound up a letdown. And then
you think?
Well, yeah, and then 2006 for me was the biggest letdown. When Beltran came out, I was literally, I think I went catatonic. I sat, like, I remember I was watching the game. I was sitting on the floor of my aunt's living room, and I was watching the game. And when he took strike 3 and the game was over, I did not move. I didn't turn off the TV. I literally just sat there in stunned disbelief because that was the best Mets team I've ever seen. They were the best team in the National League all year. They would have easily beat the Detroit Tigers, who are an underachieving team. The American League was way down that year. And it was their World Series to lose, and they never even got them.
And Detroit, like, I don't remember if they swept them or if it was in 5 games, but Detroit upset the Yankees that year, I believe it was. Was it the Yankees? Yeah. I think it was the Yankees. But they did it really early and had like 10 days to wait. So not only were they outmatched, they were, and they'd been partying. And I remember watching that year when the Tigers won, and Kenny Rogers was pitching for the Tigers, and I think he got the final win. He got the win, or he made the start anyway. I remember him standing on top of the dugout, like with champagne spraying the fans, And I'm just thinking, they didn't win I just had this feeling right then, they're going to lose the World Series. There's way too much National League Baseball still to be played. And there's and this is just way too much of a celebration for getting there. But
well, and the Cardinals,
that was a tough
one game over 500, basically. The Cardinals won a terrible division. So, and the Tigers were basically the Mets, in the AL that year. The Tigers were real good. And, so if the Cardinals were able to beat them, the Mets really had the firepower to beat them. The Mets were a better team.
I don't know if I did. I've done this. I'm pretty sure I exploded the remote control against the wall at the final bench. I'm pretty sure. I wouldn't have done it to a cell phone in 2006. My cell phone was probably too heavy to lift. But I think I'm pretty sure I lost a few remotes that way. Over I've definitely cleared some coffee tables. Yeah.
Well, and just to wrap up,
I get so mad. I've been accused of faking it by people who can't understand that kind of that kind of emotion. I don't know. Like, I've had friends like, this is histrionics. I'm like, dude, I promise you, I'm embarrassed. Like, I can't. Like, it is like I'm alone in my house shouting and swearing. I'm in a shower. I got the game. I'm like yelling in the shower. Like, there's no. I don't care if we could be 0-161. I'm still mad. We're losing the last game.
The first time my roommate saw me watch the Mets game when I moved out here in Los Angeles, like, he was like in the other room. She was like cooking in the kitchen, and I was watching the game out in the living room. And like, I don't know what happened. It was like the game was tied, and they got a big tie-breaking hit, and I was like clapping and pounding the table. And so she peeked her head out, and she was like, everything going okay? And I was like, yeah, it was great. And I caught myself. I was like, I want you to know that I'm not doing this for theatrics. I'm not doing this because you were here. I'd be doing this if I was alone.
This is going to happen a lot. This is going to happen every day for a few months of the year. For like 6 months a year. 6 to 8 months a year every year.
Keith actually came up with a good idea. So he runs the Queens Baseball Convention, and he said, I'm going to have to do a Mets comedian panel at the next QBC.
I'd love to be a part of it, but really, I'm sure he doesn't mean it. There's so many great comedian Mets fans. Seinfeld, Chris Rock, and Kevin James alone. That's a dream team right there, Just without us, even. Then add us. Who else is it? There's Frangiola.
No, I know.
Who else? What other Mets comics do you know? Like, famous or not famous? There's got to be a bunch.
Frangiola's a big one.
Yeah,
Frangiola's a big one. I'm trying to think. There's some other folks I know, and I just off the tip of my head, I can't think of it right now. But
I love famous Mets fans. I love just like I love whenever I find out someone's a Mets fan, I have this new, like, obviously, like Julian Casablancas from the Strokes, he's a huge Mets fan, or like George R.R. Martin. Did you know that?
Yes, I did know that, because that's what I was like,
not only that, he says the kind of the pain and tragedy of being a lifelong Mets fan, of being a long-suffering Mets fan, has informed his kind of dark style of storytelling and grim kind of outlook. You could say the Red Wedding is probably you could attribute that directly to 1988. Oral Hershiser is the real killer at the Red Wedding.
Exactly. Keith saying Jim Brewer, of course, is a big Mets fan. I forgot.
Oh yeah, word. I opened for him once and we didn't talk about it. I opened for him like years ago in San Francisco, and it was a real fun. It was like a one show. He was just getting back into stand-up, and he was running a weird format. It was like standing room. He thought he had like a band up there with him. Yeah. There was no tables. It was really bizarre, but like Metallica was hanging out in the green room. Very strange. But we didn't. Yeah, there was way too much going on to get to the Mets.
None of that surprises me at all. Well, look, we went a little bit over about 10 minutes, which is fine because there's no time limit here. But
I just want to say the QBC thing is great because I didn't know. I learned about that from you asked me to do the show, which thank you for having me, by the way. But I'm a huge Mobb Deep fan, so every time I hear QBC, I'm like, oh, we repping QBC? I've always wanted. I've never been able to. I always feel like I'm some Jewish guy from San Francisco living in LA. I have no connection to Mobb Deep. So now I feel like this is finally the street cred, the Mobb. I need to where I can start rolling with Mobb Deep and using the Dunn language.
Oddly enough, and I promise I'll leave it here, but this is too good of a story because based on the Keith Hernandez thing. I actually met Havoc from Mobb Deep.
That's what's up. That's what's up.
At a show, I was doing a comedy show in Rochester, New York, and it was before Prodigy died. Mobb Deep was doing a show like at the arena, and they were staying at the same hotel. And I met Havoc, and he saw me perform stand up, and he was like, "Yo," he's like, "You were super funny, man." I was
That's the best. That's the best. I love when that happens sometimes.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That's the best. Athletes to me, I don't get starstruck around actors, but like athletes to me are like real life too, because they're used. It's you can luck into being there's not every talented comedian or actor gets famous. There's like nepotism and looks and casting. Like sports, like numbers don't lie. So I always get really impressed when I meet like athletes, and I think I guess musicians are the same way. For me, like with rap, it's kind of like skill is kind of. It's not really subjective,
Yeah, no, I feel you on that.
But that's so cool. Like when someone that you respect, like Dustin Poirier, the MMA fighter, saw me in Florida, and was like really, and the Mike Brown and that whole. They all want to have a picture with all these guys. And Poirier ended up being a huge star, and so like it's kind of cool when people that you're like, man, I was about to ask you if I could give you head or something, like, and then they're like, but yeah. And then they're all on your nuts. It's like, oh, that's the best. That's the best. Yeah.
Keith says, go to queensbaseballconvention.com and check us out. I think he means that for you, but that's just good advice for everybody. The Queens Baseball Convention is super, super fun. And if we do set up something for that, last year we had to do a virtual thing and whatever. But if we do something, I'll definitely let you know because it would be fun, especially if we could do it in person. And he does it in connection with the Mets in a lot of ways. Sometimes it's right down the street, or it was at the brewery that's there on site. So it's a lot of fun stuff that we can do. So I will definitely let you know. Jacob, man, thank you so much for doing the show.
Man, thank you for asking me, man. I had a blast.
Course.
No one's ever asked me. I've ended up talking about baseball or something over in different stuff over the years. But this is the first time I've ever done a fully Mets branded anything. And I've like a few fans stuff. Like I've a few things I'm loyal to, like Star Wars. In my life, like I'm a fan of the band Weezer. I've got to perform on their cruise. I've done Weezer themed show. I've never done anything Mets that's dope. Mets. I got to perform at a minor league all-star game once, and I hung out with Mark Loretta all night. That's a fun story. But and he was a cool guy. But I've never done a Mets thing. So thank you for popping my cherry on that.
Absolutely. Do you want to plug your social media and all that stuff?
Yeah,
and then
just check it. Jacob Sirof is one app. Yeah, if they know how to spell it, then I don't need to plug it. Just Instagram and Twitter, Jacob Sirof, one app. Let's argue about sports.
All right, man. Thank you so much for doing this, and I will talk to you again. We'll do this again. We'll do this show again in a couple weeks or a couple months, and let the Mets get a little further, and we'll see how right we were about some of these things.
Yeah, man. And when things get when are I think the Mets, when are they in Dodger Stadium?
Oh God, I know they're coming to San Diego in June.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe probably on the same road trip.
Be around the same time. Yeah, it's gotta be the same road trip. So yeah, maybe let's try to go to the game. You know,
I'm down to do that. And then also Keith says the Media Goon show, which is his show, Mets and Star Wars are going to have to bring you on. So he does a great show that's just like all kinds of pop culture, all kinds of great stuff.
Yeah,
so
the best stuff.
yeah. So yeah,
Cool.
I'll make sure you guys are connected, and maybe you can hop on his show and just talk all things Star Wars and stuff.
Love to. Hey, well, thanks for having me, John. It's a blast, and you really impressed me, man. You know, you really know your stuff. Like I think a lot of when comedians say, "Oh, I got a show about this other subject," a lot of times it's from a very, like, you know, a fan point of view. Like I was, you're very impressive. Like your knowledge, your ability to talk about sports and like in a way that sounds, you know, legit and not just like like an outsider. You sound like a real inside media guy. You know, like I don't think I could talk about the Mets all day, but like you kind of got that special, like, you know, like a sports rant swag, like John Boy Media guy kind of thing going on. But like that's cool, man. So thanks for having me, man. That was very good.
Absolutely. I'll talk to you soon.
For sure.
Later.
Go, Matt.
That is Jacob Sirof, great comic. He threw his social media there, and I'll put it in the comments below. He absolutely hilarious dude. I've worked with him before. I've seen him perform a bunch. Great Mets fan, as you can tell, passionate. It doesn't matter that he's from the Bay Area. You know, he's as big a Met fan as I've ever seen. That's how we met. We were doing a show. He had the Mets jacket on here in LA, and I was like, what's going on, man? We just started talking about it. So I know we went a little long, but it's all good because it was a fun show. Thank you guys for watching it, whether it was on my page or, of course, on the Queens Baseball Convention pages on Facebook or on Twitter. We're going to be off next week because I'm out of town, but then I have a great guest the following week. So the next show is going to go live on May 24th. It'll be Monday, May 24th. I'll throw the time out as soon as we solidify it, but I've got a great guest. He's an awesome, speaking of, he's an awesome rapper. He's a great musician, huge Mets fan from Queens. So I'll reveal that in a little bit, but there's a little bit of a tease, and I'll see you guys next time. This has been Catching Feelings.